And welcome to ETF Edge, your go-to place for everything exchange-traded funds. I'm your host, Pisani, joined today by John Davi of Astoria Portfolio Advisors, Alfred Eskandar of Salt Financial, and Armando Senra. He's the head of U.S., Canada, and Latin American iShares over at BlackRock. Monday marked the next chapter in the Eurozone slowdown story. Lousy manufacturing numbers weighed on markets overseas. Flash composite PMI contracting for the first time in 6 years in September. Flash manufacturing PMI dropped to its lowest level in over a decade. These are lousy numbers. Let's break this all down and try to put it into context. And Alfred, we have been talking about this for years. Europe consistently underperforming. I think the European indices are essentially flat in the last 5 years. The S&P is up 50%. Yep. And this is not getting any better, these numbers.
No, I think you could almost go all the way back to the root cause in the financial crisis, where the U.S. was able to respond quickly and fast, and obviously very effective, where Europe had to sort of get together and have many different interests finally agree. And there was a slower turnaround, and you're seeing it kind of bleed into 2019.
And Armando, you have iShares, one of the biggest European broad funds. That's the core MSCI Europe, IEUR is the symbol there. Talk about flows. You watch this carefully. Are investors over in Europe dispirited, disinterested? Are they still putting money to work in European funds? Are they putting it to work here? Give us a sense of where the money's going.
Thank you. Here, Bob. I think it's very similar to what you said at the beginning. What we see with European investors is a year or a couple of years where they're pulling money out of European equities and out of equities overall, more of a risk-off trade, and moving into, in the case of iShares, into fixed income iShares. So we see that trend very much so in Europe and also in the US, where really when you look at that ticker that you mentioned, broad-based European exposure, it's been no traction. It's been pretty much flat to down, negative flows, and most of the action has been going into fixed income ETFs.
Now, we have, John, talked about this before. Is there any way to play this where you can make money over there, for example? We've talked about hedged ETFs. So WisdomTree has a hedged ETF that hedges out the effects of the currency. Weak euro today, the HEDJ is the symbol there. That's been outperforming on the year. And yet, it doesn't get rid of all the problems, obviously. Right. If you can hedge out the currency, but if you've still got an underlying weak economy, it's not going to make all of your problems go away.
Correct, yeah. I think if you look at the EFA ETF from iShares, a lot of that, it's European banks, Japanese banks, a lot of the cyclicals. If you actually look at the EFA high-quality stocks, so WisdomTree has this IHDG.
The EFA is Europe, Africa, Far East, right?
Correct.
Which is the broad developed world ex-United States.
Correct. So that IHDG is up like 21% year to date. So it trades a little bit more expensive than EFA. But I do think you want to dip your toes into international markets. It's very hard to time these things. Armando mentioned people that are taking money out of stocks into bonds. That seems very dangerous to me.
Do you want, I guess an asset allocation would tell you should have money over in Europe, yet it's hard to recommend when you're underperforming 5 years in a row. I know it's buy low, sell high. Is there any argument that can be made, given the underperformance, that this is a good time to consider?
Actually,
You've got all those funds over there that anybody wants to can put money into.
Yeah, and actually our BlackRock Investment Institute just released this quarter a more positive note on Europe. And when you look at Europe, where we're recommending, for instance, the ECU ticker, which is a Eurozone exposure, is, you have to be diversified in a portfolio. You have to be diversified. So absolutely you need to own Europe.